And GRC, we involve ourselves in various on academic on endeavors. And one of them is this particular one we are doing today, the in commemoration of in commemoration of World Health Day with the theme Healthy Beginnings, Hopeful Futures. And we have the moderator, the place person of Toby Adeomi from University of Illinois in USA, and then we have Miss Islamiat Mukhtar. She worked with Slum and Rural Health Initiative. They will be hosting the program for today. Thank you very much. Can anyone read me?
Yes, I can hear you from my end. Do you want to ask the host to start?
Miss Islamiat, are you good to go, ma?
Okay, yes, I am good to go. Good evening. Good day, everyone. So yeah, my name is Islamiat Mukhtar, and yeah, just like you said, I'm the host for today. So I'm glad to be here. So is any of the speaker on the call already?
Yes, all the speakers are on call. Waiting for your prompts.
Okay, no problem. So I think we can like kickstart the session then. So just like I said, our moderator is Toby Adeomi from the University of Illinois. And we have two exceptional speakers joining us today, Dr. Olayinka Ibrahim, Assistant Professor and Deputy Head of Pediatrics at the University of Global Health Equity. So he's going to be like sharing with us insights on bridging research and policy for maternal and newborn health in Africa. And also we have Dr. Juliana Simango. I don't know if I pronounced that well. Research psychologist and lecturer at the University of South Africa. She'll be discussing the coping strategies for international students and early career scholars. So without further ado, I think we can like get started from my end. So our first speaker for today is Dr. Olayinka Ibrahim, a distinguished pediatrician and medical educator with a strong background in research, teaching, and clinical services. Dr. Ibrahim is currently an assistant professor and deputy head of pediatrics at the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda. It's a fellowship in pediatrics from the National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria and a master's degree in human physiology from the University of Illinois. Dr. Ibrahim has extensive experience in clinical service and training in under-resourced settings. He has contributed to multi-country studies and collaboration with over 120 publications to his name. Dr. Ibrahim's passion for improving child health outcome in under-resourced settings is evident in his work as a consultant, pediatrician, and educator. We are honored to have him share his expertise with us today and bridging research and policy for maternal and newborn health in Africa. So, Dr. Ibrahim, I don't know, is he here with us?
Hello, I can hear you. Hope you can hear me too.
Yes, sir. Good day, good evening, good afternoon. So nice to have you here. So,
Thank you.
okay, so can I go on?
Let's go.
Okay, sir. So my first question, sorry, is based on your experience in Nigeria and Rwanda, what are the biggest barriers to strengthening pediatric healthcare system in under-resourced setting?
Well, the first thing is the political will, the political commitment, because the Rwanda is not as big as Nigeria. It's not even up to size of the Lagos, but the political commitment to healthcare sector is a bit stronger than Nigeria. In other words, the government give all the necessary support and ensure that people at the aim of affair of the health sector are people that are capable and everything is strictly monitored. So relatively, the health sector is a bit, I would say, a bit well managed and more structured than Nigeria in such a way that the primary care system works, the secondary care system works, and the tertiary also works. So I think the political will, political commitment remain one of the critical parts to which we need to really look at if we are going to strengthen the healthcare sector in Nigeria. I
Okay, so
hope.
how do you think governments and healthcare institutions address these challenges through policy and training initiatives?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, the government are the main drivers of the policy. They are the main people that really look at the policy. But again, I think government should be able to clearly define their roles. They should provide an enabling environment for the health sector to thrive on its own. For instance, I think in Rwanda, the health sector to some extent has some semi-autonomous. Each individual's hospital can run to the best of their ability. What the government do is more like supervisions, providing the policy frameworks. Even in the payment of the salary and other stimulus, the hospital will still contribute out of their own income to the running of the hospital, some percentage. So it's not like, so implication is that if you have an hospital that is not doing well, the worker too, we know that it will really affect them. So this also prompts the healthcare worker to also give their best, knowing the fact that if you're able to get more satisfaction from our customer, it's going to also impede on the health outcome of that. It's going to affect the satisfactory outcome from that hospital compared to the fact that where you know the fact that the hospital contribute little or nothing to that one is just the government that role. So the government role should be reduced to like regulatory, give the hospital some fledged full support to really carry out the desired function. Then the government should be like an oversight, like accreditation, ensuring that the things are in place.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, so given your work in the medical education, so what strategies do you think can be used to enhance the training of pediatricians and healthcare workers to improve the child health outcomes?
Yeah, I think one thing we have to really agree, and with my little experience, is the fact that medical education has gone beyond just class classroom delivery of the lecture. Uh, Method of teaching has changed dramatically in the last few years. We are now in eras of transformative educational approach, where the learner take the central approach and the teacher tend to be like facilitator. If we had to really change the landscape of healthcare in Africa, we need to also restructure our curriculum. We need to urgently review the curriculum and align it with the goals and our desires. In other words, the curriculum should be tailored towards the Africa's be. The problem of Africa has changed the last 30, 40 years ago. And surprisingly, we are still being trained with the same set of curriculum that were inherited from our seniors, which is no more visible to address the current reality. For instance, I'm sure when most of us were in school, I'm not sure we will note that we'll come to area to which AI, artificial intelligence, will be a critical sectors of training medical students, where simulation is now a core part of training of students for them to practice not on the real life patient. So these are all areas of transformative learning approach, medical education, to which if we are going to get to our desired goal of achieving our 2030 SDG goals, then we need the urgent reform of our curriculums to align with our desired goal, to align with our learning outcomes in such a way that our desire is to reduce the bodies of the maternal and newborn health in Africa.
Actually, noted, because I used to wonder that as well, because I feel like we are not moving well with the trend when it comes to the curriculum actually. So how can like the mentorship programs and interdisciplinary collaboration support this effort?
Yes, the the mentorship collaborations remain a critical part to which can also change things because all African university training medical doctors are not moving at the same pace. We're also not at the same leverage. So it naturally that will be to the advantage if the more experienced modern set of university that are doing well actually adopted the local one and provide a mentorship for university. The exchange of the students also ensure there's adequate exposure so that we're able to actually synchronize our learning and in tune of the modern reality and modern thing that can address our issue. So mentorship should be from the higher to the lower, those that are really, really adopting the current competence-based curriculum, trying to bring those ones that are really based on what we call a traditional medical curriculum on board. So it remains an area critical. For instance, in my own universities, we have been mentored by Harvard and Stanford. And that's actually provided us with leverage to make sure that to some extent, the teaching method are a bit modern, appropriate technology approach, and there are also adequate evaluation of the programs to which it can usually be improved when the necessity comes.
Okay, you're talking about something about traditional something. Like I don't get that part, sorry.
Okay. So the method of teachings to which we based on the fact that you go to your class, somebody give a lecture. After then, you just go towards the clinical wing to get your exposure to see patients. You come back, you write exams without a clearly defined outcomes, which is what we are trained with, you know. So that is called the traditional curriculum. So the modern curriculums tend to focus on you talking about what is your learning outcome when you are doing a clinical posting. For instance, your learning can be that you want your students to be competent in history taking, you want them to be competent in management of common childhood illnesses. So you want them to be competent in physical exam. These are clearly defined when you are delivering your curriculum. Traditional curriculum will just list out the topics, not watching. For instance, it's just infectious disease, malaria, diarrhea disease. But what do you want learner to really learn? And you can actually appreciate this one that when you pick some textbook, they are written only on malaria, spanning several page. You cannot expect students to learn the whole of that textbooks on the bit of learning malaria. But what exactly do you want this student to really achieve when you talk of the malaria? Is it diagnosis? Is it management? So those are what we call the modern set of curriculum compared to the traditional that just lists out those topics. So this also brings out the fact that if we are going to improve our health outcome indices, we need a restructuring of the curriculum that we presently implemented in most Africas. Most of them were based on the old traditional method.
Okay, so from this question like personal from my own view, let's say left to you now, you want to like review, restructure the curriculum. What do you think is the first thing you're going to like do to get things in line to do that?
Yeah, the first thing we need to do is also identify where we are in Africa because curriculum should be driven by the current anticipated problem. For instance, if we had higher maternal and newborn health care, then we should structure the curriculum also with the next set of doctors we are trainees are more competent in handling maternal and newborn care, not just any doctor they are produced. Otherwise, the maternal and newborn health. So the first we do is to really look at what exactly where we are in terms of research-based, what we call the community need, society need. So this is where the modern eras of trainings of doctor comes from. It's not more just list of topic, but what do you need in that particular area? What do you need in that country? What do you need? Where are the data is coming from? So we are going to structure the training of Doctor 2001. Then for you to review the curriculum, there are various processes of reviewing the curriculum. There is every profile process they are modifying. So this needs to be followed. But the first thing is to define the problem. Usually you carry out this by surveys, by looking at the data, by interviewing people on boards, by collecting data from the hospitals. So then you go ahead to actually define your learning outcomes. Then you go ahead to structure your curriculum. You develop the content. You implement it. Then you evaluate this at the end of the day, maybe every 5 years. Have you achieved the desired goal? That way you ensure that you produce doctors that can work in your environment and give you the best.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. You like answer my own personal question. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
moving on, um with your background in pediatric nutrition, what practical strategies can be used to improve child nutrition in resource limited settings?
I think I like this question. Thank you so much. I like the fact that it's focused on in resource limited countries. The greatest challenge with malnutrition is not the food for the kids. If it has been the food, then the millions of ready to use therapeutic food that has been pumped into Africa should have solved the problem. So addressing malnutrition in Africa, we need to go back to the root cause. Why are kids malnourished? The commonest one is low socioeconomic indices, poverty, lack of accessibility to food. So if naturally it can empower the parents, it can empower the guardians to which they have access to the foods, they have to have the economic empowerment, it can dramatically reduce the burdens of the malnutrition. Food. Two, we should also look locally. That what are the food that can be used locally to improve nutrition status of children and environment? So that it's not just using the RUTF alone, but what we can do locally from our own maize, our own grain, our own beans, in such a way that the parent could go ahead to really, really be able to really address the issue of malnutrition. So we should source locally for those food that can solve the malnutrition. We should also go ahead to economically empower. And most importantly, health education cannot be left behind. The continuous education of the parents through the social various medias, various outlets on the benefit of exclusive breastfeeding, how to start complementary feeds, are all the things that can really work out. Because if you look at, I think recently I was in a feed in the rural part of Rwanda and I had a parent that had a child that malnourished. And when we inquire further, we discovered she as a mother only eat once in a day. The kids also eat barely once, maybe once in a day, and another small token. That's a recipe already for malnutrition because if she's not eating well, she won't be able to breastfeed the child well. The child will not have the adequate development. And why can't she do so? She's extremely poor. So even if you give the kids all the routine in this world, without addressing the economic empowerment of the parents, the malnutrition will still persist in the family. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this from your experience, have you ever like seen a situation whereby maybe a patient is complaining of not being hungry, like this is not a case of food not being available. Okay, this person is not always hungry, does not eat, and anytime they like, okay, let me eat. Anytime they eat when they are not hungry, they tend to have like stomach disorder or something like that. Have you ever like seen a situation like that?
Well, I will say that I'm not really much experienced by that, but what I want to know is the fact that you see, every kid has their own feeding pattern. There are people who call there are kids that will call binge eaters. They wait small, few hours, they will come back. The most important thing is to make sure the food is available. The child's then, of course, the children can also be cherry picking. It can take a lot of time before getting filled up. So you just have to really be patient. But if somebody doesn't really feel hungry, it may be something that really to be evaluated. If it's physically, mentally, okay, they are not really be much to worried about. But however, if the person has some other symptoms, it will be something to really. If we take food to get the stop, it could be some food intolerance that need to be investigated. But otherwise, if everything has turned out to be negative, they're all as well and good. But in terms of trying to pediatrialize this one, I would say feeding kids has to be patient. Feeding has to be in its gradual process. Let me give you an example. If you are starting a complementary food at the age of 6 months, and you are studying 4 or 5 type of food, that child is going to get confused and he's going to get frustrated because the taste bud is usually to breast milk. So you bring another one, you just see like a poisoning. So you have to introduce other food gradually, maybe one at a time until the taste bud improves. Then you can add diversified and be a bit patient each time. It's natural for the child to throw away the first 2 or 3 days, but over time we'll get used to it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, so how do you like see the role of community health workers in promoting the proper pediatric nutrition?
Indeed, I think the community health worker will remain the futures of healthcare in Africa. We need to face that fact. And they have critical role to play because they are closer to the people. They are accessible. They are member of the community. They are even more trusted than we, the physicians, because it's like somebody you know each other from childhood and live by your house. You're going to trust the person more than just a doctor you have walked several kilometers to go and see. So in terms of nutritional, indeed, they are the one that can be sure that the instructions that are given to recovery child are followed. They are the ones that bet to educate the parents, and most times they are the ones that do house-to-house visits to pick those that malnourished from borderline malnutrition to severe quickly. So even with the current reality that a lot of healthcare workers has left the country, has left the continent for greener pasture, the community healthcare workers are going to be the primary role that will be responsible for management of malnutrition. Indeed, for countries like Rwanda, moderate moderate malnutrition are managed at the community level by community extension worker who go to visit usually on weekly or daily basis with the child, enter the data of the child into the child card, and from there take decision whether this child is improving or this child should be referred back to the health care, and also update their data thereabout. So they are going to be likely going to be the one that will lead the revolutions if you are going to improve on the child malnutrition in Africa through what we call tax shifting.
Okay. Well, so thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. Okay, so I think we can like take one more question before we like welcome others to like if they have any personal question as well. So your research has like contributed to multi-country studies on child death. So what are some of the most effective evidence-based approach for reducing neonatal and infant mortality?
Yeah, I like this question. The most effective way to reduce infant and neonatal mortality is the strengthening of the healthcare workforce, the strengthening of the collaboration, the strengthening of the referral system. Once the healthcare system works, the tendency of dramatically reducing the child mortality is very, very high. For instance, if every woman could deliver at a healthcare facility, those with high risk are promptly identified, referred through a good referral system to the secondary health facility, and they're able to successfully deliver. And those who maybe need care also referred to tertiary healthcare level. Evidence has shown that this dramatically will curb the rate of both neonatal and the maternal mortality associated that are very, very high in Africa, and is not expected. So what really happens currently in Africa is that most times these healthcare systems are fractures. Everybody are not linked together. And of course, the financial aspect. Governments also indicated that if you can make the maternal and newborn care free, a lot of parents will go to the hospital, a lot of life will be saved, and the whole data could also be improved. Compared to the fact that a woman that's not eating is in labor, what is going to think is that I will not able to afford the pay when I get to the hospital. Of course, if you know you cannot afford, you rather try at home. And when we have the future outcomes, is now added to our statistics. So it's one areas of revolution that Africa needs to know. The maternal and newborn care need to be revolution in such a way that the cost as a impeding factor is removed. The healthcare sector is also strengthened. And finally, the healthcare workforce is high time we believe that for also improving this, we also need to do tax shifting. A lot of things that are done by doctors, by physicians, that could be ceded to the lower healthcare Africa should be done so because the doctors, physicians are not enough. But these community healthcare workers are there in every village. They could be taught how to assess for high-risk pregnancy and refer appropriately. They could be taught how to look for danger signs and fully implemented and follow up with the referral. These are some of those things that could improve the childhood and maternal indices in Africa.
Yeah, actually, because I believe we need to like adopt that tax shifting model a lot more because these people are the people that like understand their community more than we do actually. So empowering them to like get the job done is actually a very good idea. So thank you very much, sir. I think we can like welcome 2 or 3 questions from the participants. I don't know if anyone is like have any question. Okay, if you don't have any question, please can we like have some reactions, like just so we can be sure we are following. Can send the reaction, send the message through the chat box.
I have a reaction in that regard. Thank you so much, Dr. Lainka, for this responses you provided. I kind of learned a little bit more about the management of healthcare or the healthcare system generally in other context. I'm more familiar with the Nigerian context because there's almost no one here who has not been to an hospital before for one thing or the other, and we can attest to how palpable the site is always whenever you are sick and you can get prompt care because there are fewer doctors or that people are not willing to serve in extreme circumstances. But this is my reaction. You did mention that there needs to be tax shifting to frontline workers. I believe that's what community health workers are called. For instance, during COVID, it was community health workers that helped sensitize people about the benefits of, staying at home, isolating themselves if they feel sick and all of that. And that helped stem the rate of, mortalities that came from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, after COVID-19, some of these health workers are not involved in, you know, policy making processes regarding how to manage epidemics in the future. I I'm not sure because again, I'm not an health expert, how often there are conferences whether it's on maternal health, pediatric medicine, or general health, that actually centers the experiences and the, perspectives of these frontline workers. And I think that is one of the undoing of the African healthcare system. So if it's going to come as a question, I guess the question would be where do you see you already mentioned that they are the future of the healthcare system or healthcare practice generally, but where do you see healthcare workers in the decision-making processes concerning pandemic readiness, prevention, and management in Africa, given the current state at which it is?
Thank you, uh, Mr. Adeomi. This is one of the challenges we face in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa generally. Your point is valid. We saw their role during the screenings, the COVID pandemics, how they're able to come properly to provide support. Unfortunately, they are still being relegated to the backyard. They are still not an active participant because the government has still not really acknowledged their roles, and they remain area to which one of the things we are discussing today is how to bridge this gap. It will remain an area to which we need to really, really, really strengthen. They need to really, really be there. They need to have their voice. They need to make their contributions, which is not the actual thing that is presently in practice now. Rather, they are relegated to the back, and evidence shows that where tasks are shifted to them, they often do it diligently. They are often doing excellently, and they tend to really, really deliver. But it's area that we need to really explore and ensure that is implemented into a way that they have active contribution. But present reality is that they are still at the backyard with minimal or little contribution to the healthcare. And if another pandemic comes up, well, I'm sure that there may be some disarrays to which we still have to go to the drawing boards. Though some countries learn a lot from the pandemic and it really helped them when it comes to another issues like the Marburg outbreak in Rwanda that was excellently curtailed within just how many weeks was because of lesson learned from the COVID. The contact tracing was excellent. The daily sharing of the information was good. The symptoms were well disseminated. A lot of media campaign were done. Vaccination was started on time and put everything under controls. I hope I address your questions.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a thought in my mind because you have conferences of health ministers, African health ministers, and you rarely hear about conferences of frontline workers. I'm sure there are such groups and organizations that cater to the needs and the work of frontline workers, but you don't popularly hear about conferences of those kinds of people. And I wonder what we will do when a pandemic like COVID-19 comes up again. But thank you for those perspectives, especially in the context of Rwanda.
Thank you. Over to Islamiyat. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much, sir. So I think we can like take a break with you right now and have our second speaker come up as well. I don't know if Dr. Julia is on the call right now.
Before we invite Dr. Simango, yes, she's on the call. I would like us to take a bathroom break or stretch your feet because you're talking about health here, and one of the things we like to do in the GRC is to practice what we preach. So if you've been staring at your screen for so long, this is probably the time to take some screen break, walk around, stretch before we resume the session with Dr. Simango. And there's going to be a live poll that will be shared shortly. Please feel free to put responses to that poll. It's kind of a segue to the session with Dr. Simango. And all the responses are anonymous, so you are free to put in your own opinion. Thank you. All right, the results are in. We appreciate those who participated in the short poll. We just want to give some context to why we are having the poll and a syndicate session on, the coping strategies of students wherever they are in the world, especially those who identify as African students. And that is because one of the things we've noticed on the GRC for a while is that global development tend to shape the work as well as the practice of graduate students, especially as they move on to the careers of teaching or whether they are doing research or even practicing as we have medical professionals here. This global development shapes their thinking, shapes the direction of their scholarship, also affects, the outcome of their project. And so we think it's important to have conversations around these issues. Now we'll be stopping the recording for a bit because we expect that this session will be very therapeutic in the sense that people will be welcome to share their personal experience with whatever issues you've had regarding studying abroad or even studying back at home, or if you're experiencing some form of anxiety related to your health as a grad student, this is an opportunity to talk about it. So we don't want anyone's opinion to be out there because we are live streaming this. So we'll be stopping the recording for a bit. Please feel free to, you know, feel free to open your camera if you want to be seen or not. But what is important is that we all engage and, participate as, people who are willing to forge a better future for ourselves. Once again, I'm Toby Adeomi. I'm the team leader of the Graduate Research Clinic. I'm also a teaching fellow at the Department of African American Studies at the University of Illinois. I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Julius Mango, who is a dear colleague and a friend. We met several years ago at the Ife Institute of Advanced Studies at the Obafemi Awolowo University, and it's been a pleasure meeting and knowing her. Dr. Simango is a research psychologist and a lecturer at the Department of Psychology, the University of South Africa. She recently completed a PhD in psychology, and our dissertation was focused or titled Shifting the Geography of Reason, Psychology in Black. That's quite interesting because we've always seen psychology and studies related to health, like medicine, as a white-centered or Western-sourced knowledge. It would be interesting to know that many of these knowledges and disciplines have their roots in Africa. Our research expands on the psychology of oppression in post-colonial societies, particularly the afterlife of colonization, engaging the psychological life of the colonized. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Simago. Julia, welcome here.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and also thank you so much for the invite. Please don't mind the headboard. It's the evening for us here in South Africa. It's almost 8 o'clock. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very excited to engage with everyone. And it's also nice to conversate with you after such a long time. I hope that we're going to have a very meaningful, conversation, and as we, engage and share some ideas. I think when I looked at the invitation, I'm like the conversation also affects us those who are still at home and not have not traveled or worked overseas yet. But the issues that young academics are going through, I think we can all relate that it's quite difficult to establish yourself, in this big empire. So thank you so much for your invitation.
Yeah, very welcome, Julia. Now, I just want to say that, like you just mentioned, this affects everyone, whether or not you are in your country of birth, you are always in transit at some point. One of the requirements of scholarship is that you travel to exchange ideas with colleagues elsewhere. You present your papers at conferences, you go for summer schools, attend fellowships, and so at some point in your career, you will travel. And so what is currently happening would affect you if it's not already affecting you. So we need to, have that open mind concerning immigration. Now, my first question, and maybe this is so much of a personal reflection because earlier today, I was in class with some students and we're talking about the implications of a recent decision to revoke the visa status of some international student here in the US. For those of us who might not be following developments in the US, since the inauguration of the current administration, there's been a lot of anti I wouldn't say anti-people of color sentiments, particularly because it also affects those who are white, but I would say anti-student, anti-resistance kind of sentiment. So from, arresting students who protested at the last year's and the genocide in Palestine protests across campuses to banning students from protesting to revoking the visa status of students to cutting funding for students who already had funding for their programs. This is what is currently happening in the United States, and a lot of Africans, because that's the community I represent, are very scared for their lives. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, the director of my center sent an email to all African international students on campus saying that 19 students have had their visas revoked within the last 1 week. And none of them know about this because even the university is not aware. And so within hours, they are meant to travel back to their countries of birth. So the question for you here is this new? Not just in the US, even back in Africa? I know you're familiar with the South African context. Do you think this kind of developments are new?
I don't think it's a new thing. If I think if we want to understand what the current landscape of America right now, we really need to put it in history. Also looking at the academic space as it has been. I think recently there has been a lot of protest academic work. There has been a lot of social justice work in the academic space. And I think a lot of conservatives are not really um, accepting to that idea of a world that is for social justice and the world that everybody can live peacefully in. So I don't think this is something new, but also this shows. I think you were talking about whether it's if it's directly related to African students, but we know there are anti-Black sentiments in America. So if we look at Trump's movement, it's basically to conserve whiteness and white America. And what he's seeing that is Black people per se are really encouraging the social justice movement. And when we look at other races as well, they're really coming into, issues of social justice. And for social justice, it does not work for whiteness. It does not work for white people because that means that Black academics and other immigrants, African immigrants, will form part of the academic space, but not just academic space, but also the workforce. So I think this is a move, to keep America white again or great again, as they say to be. So I think the academic space finds itself, within the bigger space of Trump and the Republicans trying to reclaim their identity. And we know how the academic spaces have functions for Africans. It has influence some of the biggest policy making decisions surrounding who are Black people and what they are meant to be. We know the studies that they have done, to undermine, but also lie about Black people's capabilities. So the academic space have really served as a space to oppress. And I think most of us, even if we go through literature, we have seen how it has become oppressive. The things that we read that were written about Africans are really sad to look at. So this is going back to what whiteness is about and what America is. And we should not even be surprised at this move. What we need to do as Africans is to not relax and realize that actually the world is as it was before. We try social justice and some people do try to accommodate, but I think they don't no longer have space to accommodate Africans anymore. And we see it in how the Republicans and also I think Republicans and Trumps are not just there in the office. They're in the office because people voted for them. So these are the sentiments of Americans on the ground every day. Trump is echoing what is going on in America.
Thank you very much for that. I totally hear you when you say that these sentiments have always been, because I've been working on a project since the Obama era about how Africans, even in the US, are being marginalized, despite the fact that President Barack Obama is considered to be the first Black person to ever ascend that position. And this also acts back to the question of, even if a Black person emerges as president, would this trend reverse? Would it change? Because we've seen that several times in African countries where we think that when the president or a leader from a particular group or a particular section of society emerges, things will change, but things get worse. Now, I want to situate this within some context, because we know that this is not only happening in the US, it's also happening in Germany, it's happening also in South Africa, it's happening in several other countries. As a matter of fact, I remember in 2019 when I was in Ghana, I was attending the um, Pan-African Doctoral Academy at the University of Legon. There was actively a protest for Nigerian students in Ghana to leave, because apparently there was a professor who was on sabbatical in Ghana, who made certain comments that sounded offensive to Ghanaians. So there's always been this sentiment even within Africa. And so it looks as if Africans are going around with a cause for them to be, abused and, sent back wherever they go to. What does this mean for career mobility, especially those who are beginning to think of internationalizing their careers? We just talked about, the world that and a lot of our doctors are planning or are already abroad. And so it seems that this trend will never stop. What does this mean, this development we see around us, for internationalizing your career?
Yeah, I think this is a crisis for career development per se. I think as I was thinking about today's session and how we want to grow as early, career academics, and I think reflecting, towards myself as well. And when you're done with your PhD studies and all these other things, you want to um to move abroad, or you want to present your work abroad. But what we're realizing now, that there's no academic freedom. And that becomes an issue, especially when you do academic work. But the biggest issue would be, individuals who are, mostly want to do work related to racial work and racism. I think also people are looking towards doing the work of social justice and gender relations. If you're looking towards doing that kind of work, you are obviously seen as destabilizing, the empire. You are now questioning the empire. And I think that's why we've seen some of the other students having their visa revoked just for protesting. So we mobility is not going to be quite easy, to go out there and present the work that you're interested in. And especially for some of us who are interested in race work, there's no way that we would want to keep quiet about it, because if you look at colonization and what it has done, it still affects Africans even today. And we cannot keep quiet about something that has affected us for so many years, for centuries even. I mean, the amount of years that we have for when our countries got independence or democracies, it does not even amount to even a quarter of the amount of years that Black people were oppressed by the colonial system. So the difficulties will be those kind of things. You will have to now move according to what the country where you want to expand your work will be interested in. So the issue of sovereignty here is a problem, and I foresee it being a challenge for quite a long time. And I think it's only until our African countries, especially our government, it's only then, if they realize the importance of our academic work the way we see other nations, especially the Western nation would see the importance of research, the importance of knowledge creation. But I think what I've also realized is that our governments do not really take knowledge creation as much as they should. We do research, but our research don't even end up in policy making. And the only way that we can have mobility in our careers is if our governments really take serious note of the type of research that we do and really um, put in some efforts, to include research and our research, especially doctoral students' research and master's research, into their policy implementations. I mean, an example that I would give now is the PEPFAR issue. America has taken off funding for some of the HIV and AIDS program. And some of the HIV and AIDS program, they really funded the research that some of the scholars were doing. And because of that aid being taken away, there's a gap now. There is no funding. And now the government is saying they do not have enough money to fund the research. And the research is quite important. We need to do research on HIV and AIDS in order for us to find some cure for the disease. But if the government is not really finding resources to fund research, then that means that we are now becoming vulnerable to go and to look for research, to look for career options and to look for opportunities elsewhere. And I think that's where we are being failed by our government.
Sure, very true. Whenever people reach out to me to say that, oh, I'm trying to apply for a PhD program, what topic should I work on? And that's not up to you, really. It's up to the system that privileges certain kinds of projects above others. And so you find some researchable ideas that don't get funds, and so therefore effectively suspended or forgotten, abandoned, and some that, you know, tend to encourage other forms of knowledge alien to African knowledge getting funded. One of my dilemma is, do I do something related to US interest or do something related to African interest? Because my interests are the intersection of African and American interests. But yeah, here I am trying to negotiate what my research project should look like because I need to fund that. Now let's talk about Black psychology because that's what you studied. And you know, with the conversations I've had with you previously, I see how a lot of people have alienated psychology and kind of marginalized African scholars who have worked around psychology and things like that. How do you think, or what lessons can we draw from Black psychology about coping with times like this?
What we see from the Black psychology movement, it initially started in the US when a lot of Black psychologists were also, especially in the 1960s, and this was a crucial time in America. I think that it's the time where the 1960s movement, where a lot of racial segregation policies were really being done away with, not completely, but in a minimal sense. So they sought a way in which they can understand Black people's experiences without relying on Western, forms of knowledge.
Mm.
And when we look into Africa as a whole, we have people who do African psychology. So those are the scholars who do psychology based on our African indigenous knowledges, our African ways of being, our African cultures. I think in Nigeria, we have a scholar called Augustine Nyowe, who does some of the African psychologist work. So what they have shown us is the importance of understanding history and where you come from. And I think for me, it also helps if you understand the history, you're able to navigate much better. You're able to know what you're up against, you're able to know how to position yourself. And sometimes if you don't know the history, if you don't know how the racial system works, even the things that are caused by the system, you're more likely to personalize them and think that you are the one who caused them. So it is quite important to understand your history and how it affects you individually and also on a collective level or as a community. So they have really looked at the impact of colonization per se in our behaviors, in our ways of being, in our thinking, because oppression comes along with violence, and we know how detrimental the violence of white people were, all over Africa. If they were able to steal people and to enslave them, so we can't imagine the amount of violence that we are still experiencing even today that are intergenerational. So being able to understand those things makes you understand how to cope better with the system as it is currently. If we look at how the policies are being implemented today, we already know that we have ancestors who fought the battle lines, who took time to know who they are up against, and they're able to prepare themselves. So that means that if you understand the system that is fighting against you, you can prepare yourself. But what is also important is that they also studied how people were resisting. And resistance is part of life. It's part of development, and there's no nation that can sit and wait for people to oppress them without doing anything. And they have shown us that by resisting, this is a psychological move to say that we are not happy with what you're doing to us, and there is a psychology of resistance. And this, so by understanding those kind of things, we can able to understand why we have migrant students who are doing this well. They know what they're up against, they know where they're coming from, and they know the type of work that they need to put into their work. So at the end of the day is knowing who you are and knowing your history and who you're up against in the world and what you need to do to prepare yourself. So, and I think it goes along with everybody who's living in this precarious world. Know the history so that you know where you place yourself in the world. If there's a new policy that is coming, they're actually saying, go and read that policy, and so that you know how to fight for yourself. Because we do not have ancestors who did not fight, they did fight. So by knowing and by embracing the fact that we had ancestors that fought, you were able to fight.
Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. By knowing that we have people who have fought and are still fighting, we learn how to fight. Now, I didn't want to go there, but permit me to reference something by Paulo Freire, the British philosopher, or rather he's popularly known as one of the foremost philosophers of education. And in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, there's something he mentioned there that there is no such thing as a neutral education process. It says education functions as an instrument that is used to facilitate integration of generations into the logic of the present system. One of the things is internet is that every education in itself is political. So whether you're studying psychology, studying political science, studying medicine, studying, history, all of those disciplines are political because they were created to advance certain interests over others. And I feel that African students are not sufficiently aware of this, especially when they aspire to study abroad. One experience I've had was with the international relations curriculum at one of the universities I first attended when I came to the US. I had no case study on Africa in that curriculum other than South Africa, and it was a marginal reference to South Africa. And I'm like, I know international relations enough to know that Africa has a lot of contributions to international relations. And so I started looking for my own alternative or counter curriculum. I reached out to some colleagues in the institution, reached out to the librarians to send me a list of readings, a list of, reference materials to understand IR in Africa. Many people don't know this. So this is my next question to you. In the process of teaching, mentorship, and knowledge production, which is one of the things we emphasize at the Graduate Research Clinic, how do graduate students, whether in Africa or in the diaspora, how do they center indigenous knowledges, indigenous epistemologies, ways of knowing, ways of being about the world in their work?
One of the ways in which we do it, I think since I've joined the University of South Africa, we have been rewriting the curriculum, and in the field of psychology, what we have been doing it is saying that our indigenous knowledge, our ways of doing things is our psychology. So we were able to say that there's no way that we can be a people without having our ways of being and our ways of doing in the world. So whatever concept that we have that we know that is being used by us, we are going to take it and see how we can psychologize it, you know. So that's one ways in which we have been doing it, trying to look at um philosophies, you know, African philosophies in our communities. I think one of the big ones is Ubuntu, you know. Most of our cultures in South Africa, they have that concept. It's even there in different languages, and it looks at how people relate to one another. And it's a very huge concept that can go along to politics. It can go to ecologies, you know, it can go to law and all of those type of things. So it's basically talks about how we relate to one another. So we need to be able to center African philosophy. I think there's the guys such as I think it's Ifeani Mentiki who also write about personhood. Those are the people that we really do. Even the work of Agustin Nyowe, where she takes some of the information from his culture and writes about it and psychologize about it. We take concepts such as spiritual concepts as well and look at how it situates our ways of being. So we have been doing that, looking at indigenous ways of doing, of being. And I think one of the issues that I've seen as I've been involved in this writing and rewriting of the curriculum is the issues around funding, you know.
Mm,
A lot of students shy away, you know, from doing social justice related work or even African centered type of work, indigenous knowledge work because of funding. And what has now made it a bit easier for in South Africa, the government has have had a institution that follows on IKS, indigenous knowledge systems, and they're able to now branch it out to medicine and where we can take the medicine that we've grown up with, that we have taken when we have flu and all of type of other diseases, and they have an institution where people can learn about those medicine and they can be commercialized. But that's at the government level and for certain disciplines. But for us in the social sciences, it has become quite difficult, you know, to get funding. Even myself with my research, with my PhD, I had to get funding from the university as a developmental program that I had to be on to get funding. But if I take my study and I say I want to get funding outside, it becomes, you know, quite difficult. And we have to acknowledge that the resources becomes an issue for us as African students, especially as Black students. We do not have a lot of resources to you know, to do the academic work. We don't have the money, we don't have the know-hows, we don't have the intergenerational knowledge. So everything that we have to do, we have to learn from scratch.
mm,
And if you don't have resources, it becomes difficult
mm,
to go out there and find the information that you need. So that for me, that has been something that needs to change. You know, if our governments really prioritize as well the importance of studying these things, studying violence, of studying colonization, of studying history, because these are the disciplines that are quite important but are also neglected
mm,
by our governments. If you're not in STEM, it's very difficult to get funding, you know. I think even getting published now, it's becoming even more difficult if you're in
mm,
social sciences or humanities.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. You know, this is my own dilemma. You just exposed the kind of worms that I've been hiding for a long time. And this is my own personal therapy with you, and I'd like other people might have questions for you to chime in after now. I've been interested in climate change from below. I've been working on this from I believe, my first degree, and it's been more interesting to learn about how locals think of climate change, how people in marginal communities like slum areas think of climate change. And so when intervening in debates around climate change globally, I tend to center the perspectives of people in local communities. That's been my own way of, kind of reasserting African knowledges. But that can't fly right now, especially within my current program. The university has already given a list of words you cannot include in a grant proposal because words like climate change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and whatnot are no longer permitted. And so it looks as if one has to pivot to another research agenda, research problem that might be fundable, might be actualizable within the time frame you have. And so I'm stuck in a rut and I'm wondering, how do I go from here? Because this is, on the one hand, my interest and what I want to advance. On the other hand, I need to get funding to be able to advance that knowledge. So I know I'm not the only one who experiences this, whether in the US or in other institutions. I've had colleagues reach out to me to say that they are not sure if they can proceed with this idea they have. So we brainstorm, how do we check other related things that might give them some form of funding for their programs and their project. But we know ultimately there's going to be a conflict because I think it's psychologists that also says and philosophers also say that there is a concept of the self that you need to be aware of. Once you begin to do things against yourself, at some point it explodes, right? You know this is not what you want, and you begin to act against your own best interest, and that's when you start getting anxious, you get depressed, and mental health challenges set in. I don't want to have that. I'm actively working against exploding if there is if there's any more light. So what would you say to someone like me who is trying to navigate these two worlds as it is?
Wow, you are navigating the things that I'm trying to navigate. I think in the beginning of the year I was telling colleagues and friends that this year I want to apply for grants. I want to get them, and I realized that oh my God, my topics are so intense. And somebody said, have a broader topic that looks like it's not digging deep
Mm,
into certain things, and then deep in the process of it what you're going to include. So they're saying it's a matter of playing with words, especially I think also it came from asking colleagues who are doing the same work that we do.
mm,
They would get funding, and we would ask them that, but you do this kind of work, how are you able to get funding? And they're able to say, have research that you know is going to get you funding to help support the research that you know that it's not going to get funding,
mm,
you know. So if you're interested in climate work, you can do a study on the ecology of a certain community. By doing that type of work, you will tap into climate change.
mm,
So yeah, that's usually what they would advise us, that have a study, that it sort of looks like it's not radical, but what you will be using some of the other money for. And that will help you sustain you, because even the radical type of work that you want to do, you need to sustain it. You need money to buy books
mhm,
and go to museums or other places where you can get archives.
mm,
So yeah, you need to now think in duality now. You need to think about the radical and the non-radical self, so that the non-radical self is able to supplement the radical selves, because we know when you're interested in social justice work, if you do something that is opposite, you can't sleep. You don't enjoy the type of work. So
mm.
you have to find a way to sustain your interest, by playing the system. But when people say play the system,
Yeah.
yeah, they only say play the system. I'm yet to see if it works. I'm trying now because I'm busy trying to apply for funding as well. And
Mm,
the language that I'm using, I'm even shocked myself.
mm,
God,
mm,
why? why am I speaking like that? They
Mm,
will tell you, do not include this word. So I think we have to be open-minded. Let's learn the system. Um, and and I think it's some of the things that when people talk about, when people say, yeah, our leaders sold out, our
mm,
leaders did this, but some of our leaders had to realize that I cannot get everything that I want at that moment. So I have to play the system because they're not going to give it to me, the rest, all of it. I have to take a little bit of it so that I can make changes. So we have to do that. We have to play and negotiate with the system.
mm,
If we don't do that, we're at the risk of being outside the system. And I don't think it will work for anyone to be outside the system because we need to be inside it to change it.
mm. Thank you
Yeah.
for that advice. It's like what I heard some time ago that you have to reappropriate what has been appropriated from you. So
Yeah.
I guess
Yes.
one has one has to learn how to play the system, to use your
Yeah.
words. Now
But it's
let's
not easy. Yeah,
yeah,
as
it's
I can
not.
tell,
Trust me, it's
it's
not.
not easy.
Sometimes
It's a lot of pressure. I
yeah,
think,
sometimes you're writing and you're rephrasing and reiterating and this is not true, but you just want to make sure it sounds nice to make sure that someone who's reading it is able to approve or at least consider it for a funding.
yeah,
So
because
that's a real okay, go on please.
no, I think somebody once, especially with the funding stuff, somebody once said that the person who's going to approve your funding does not necessarily know the work that you're doing. So you have to make
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
easy for
Mm-hmm.
them to understand, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it has
that's
to be tailored in that way. You know what you want to do, so just you have to write it in such a way that the person who's outside your discipline or outside your understanding of the word is able to understand it.
sure.
Mm.
Thank you for that. Now, I wonder what other people are thinking about this kind of issues. I don't want to make this discussion about my own experience alone. I know some people here are already in the diaspora or planning to come to diaspora or trying to do international projects where they will have to, kind of navigate this kind of challenges. So please, this is the time for people to ask questions. Again, this is a non-recorded session. You are free to, say whatever comes to you and be sure there are not going to be consequences for that. So can we have anyone from the floor engage? Julia, you can just unmute yourself and speak or drop your questions in the chat box and I'll read it out. All right, so while we are waiting for people to make comments, I want to ask one final question before we take another break and transition back to the debates we've been having, because this conversation is not far removed from what we're talking about, early beginnings, because what affects our generation is more likely to affect the coming generation. And so I like to see the concept of health not just from the structural perspective in terms of putting certain facilities in place, engaging frontline workers and tax shifting, like Dr. Olanka has made us realize. I also see this change as ideological because I speak to my kids a lot and I wonder what tools I need to provide them to navigate their own world because I know they will have their own battles to face, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in any country they travel to. And so I constantly think of the tools to give them. So what would you say to someone willing to educate a young person or a mentee about how to cope with this kind of stress that comes with not just academic work, but also comes with, moving around a lot and facing several migration regimes.
Yeah, I think as I've said earlier, it is important to conscientize people. What I usually would say is that wherever you're going, know first who you're going to and how you will be, received there. So it is quite important to know your roots and where you will be accepted and whether you will ruffle some feathers or not. So arm yourself with information, but also to rely on people who have been there before. It's easy to navigate the system when you're seeking for mentorship and for peer support. Um, I don't think it would be wise for a person to go into those spaces alone. So it's quite important to go and find support and find people who are going to help you navigate the system. Rely on our elders, who have
Mm,
been in the space, who have pushed some boundaries.
mm,
But also know the type of limitations knowledge-wise that you have, so that you're able to grow and you're able to find uh, you can navigate and know where you need to be. Maybe possibly say in better career movements. If you know your limitation, you will know where you need help. Know the political climate. It's very important to know the political climate of where you're going. Do not go and just say it will be easy. Educate yourself about the environment where you're going and the people that you're going to meet and how they will react to you. And I think that's the burden that you have as a Black person. Everybody in the world has something against you and you never know what it is. Everybody wants to look like they are better than you, and you have not done anything to them. But it's how the metaphysics of this world are set up. And you need to be able to say, I'm going to cross those boundaries. I am not going to allow a perception of somebody who doesn't know me, who has decided that I'm this kind of a human being, and I'm not. So some sense of confidence, that is difficult to attain, but some sense of being headstrong, you need to have it, but rely on people for assistance and advice and
mm.
conscientizing yourself. I think that those are some of the important things that we would have to use to navigate the world.
All right. Thank you very much. There's a question on the chat. I'd like to read it out from Yusuf Shamaki. I really appreciate your discussion which cut across race, but I am so concerned about race, about those who wrote anything whatsoever about us, be that to protect certain interest. How would your research differ from those that don't have African interest at heart?
I think for me, the center of my interest is centering Black people and Black perspectives and their experiences, but also to present them in a way that is not stereotypic. That's what I'm saying. Academia is a very brutal word for Black people.
Mm,
So there's a lady called I think Linda Taiwan Smith. She's a native Australian who talks about how research is sort of a swear word. I think I forgot some of how she said it. Per se, but how research has been intrusive, to Black people. Every perception that people all over the world have about us is because of the misinformation that we have from research studies. Especially from the psychology point. I mean, psychology was such a very brutal discipline, and the things that they've said about us, especially Africans, are some of the worst things. Because they didn't understand us, they didn't even want to understand us. They had to put a base level in terms of how they will justify, violating and oppressing people. So for me, in my work, it's centered in the Black experience, also making sure that I do not stereotype Black people and put their knowledge
mm,
systems first and take into account the type of violence and oppression that they have experienced over the years, so that you do not end up, classifying them and putting them in the same way in which the Western forms of knowledge has done for a long time. So
mm,
centering their experience, centering the indigenous knowledge is quite important.
yeah,
Especially knowledge, their knowledge system. You learn so much about people from their knowledge systems and their cultural background, and you will
mm,
know a lot about how they experience the world, how they cope with the world, and how they do things, just by understanding where they come from.
mm,
So, yeah, positioning and centering is quite important. I think that's also part of my work speaks on when you do research, how do you position the people that you say are going to be your subjects? Who are they and how are you centering them in your work? Are you centering them the way you want them to be, or are you looking at the experience and how they're positioned in the world, and you're moving from there?
Sure. Thank you for that, Julia. If I might just add to that, many people don't know that even the theories that choose to adopt for their project are very colonial. So, for instance, you're trying to understand state behavior towards immigrants, and you're talking about displacement theory and all those things. These things have certain colonial roots that you need to critically engage. And that's why there's been a new movement to, consider theory from an indigenous perspective. For instance, there's the whole concept of grounded theory, that you don't have to assume that the world is structured in a particular way because someone has said that. You need to really see it for yourself, observe, and make your own inferences about the world. So also, in addition to centering these voices, the methods we choose to approach our projects are important. I also learned that interview itself could be a little bit colonial. And many people don't know this is what they do during interrogations. When you're interrogated, the kind of manner questions are asked as such that doesn't give you room to reflect. And whatever you say will be used against you. That is the same process or method a lot of researchers go about their research unknown to them. So what I do is not to ask the interviewee a question. I ask them what I should ask them. Like I wonder what else I should know about this thing that I don't. And that way you are flipping the conversation and making them the actual interviewer. That is how I feel we can change the perception of how Africans are. Thank you for your comments, Julia. There's someone who raised their hand earlier. I think that's Dauda. Dauda, can you unmute and ask a question? We can hear you. Are you speaking? Hello, Dauda, you're muted, but I can't seem to hear you. Okay, let's hope that Dauda is able to respond soon. But does anyone else have any questions, any comments, maybe from your own work? How have you been able to address this kind of wrong perception about Africans? It even plays into medicine, the kind of intervention that are being done in certain parts of African countries makes you think that we are still in the Stone Age because those people have been, they've been framed as victims, including what is currently happening in Sudan and South Sudan. Whenever I hear about, the UN humanitarian project, I'm asking myself, who is demanding or requesting for this aid, and how are people receiving it? Don't you know that there are also communities, especially in other countries where these refugees have fled to, that are providing aid to those who have been displaced, and they are not seen as strangers because, like Julia mentioned, the Ubuntu philosophy helps us to accommodate and relate to the experiences of other people like us. So it's important we ask ourselves, how is medicine, whether it's maternal or infant health, how is it framed as a colonial enterprise? And how are we able to change this perception in our own projects, in our own, you know, practice?
I think to add on to what you're saying, I think it's also a health issue
Mm-hmm.
On its own, because if we look at the way in which Black people were perceived as Africans in those studies that were done on Africans, you can see how we are receiving care. If you look at the humanitarian work, we we are sort of positioned as people who are to just wait and receive. And we're not looked at people who need to come up with their own solutions so that we can be able to have effective solutions to our health problems. But it also looks at the type of care that we get, especially if you look at issues around pain,
Mm,
there's been research where the old colonial research was saying that we have high pain tolerance as Black people. And in a point where now you cannot get assistance to a better
mm,
healthcare services sooner
mm,
because somebody said you are able to withstand pain for a long time. We've also seen maternal issues with a lot of Black women where they're not being given that anesthetic that they use when giving birth to help them with pain, and they're assuming that because she's a Black woman she can withstand pain, or they're
mm,
not being given proper care and assuming that these ones are strong and they'll be able to survive. But we see a lot of maternal death because of the negligence of healthcare workers. So I
mm,
think you are right in the sense that if we look at every discipline's history, we're able to understand how people were treated and how it affects us today, because these are the perceptions that have remained and they've become a part of our lives and a part of understanding the world. And
mm.
they've become very detrimental, for most of us. The sense that we are now still being infantilized, that we need to wait for somebody to come up with a solution
Right.
so that there becomes a solution for something. And the solutions do not work because the people do not live there. They do not understand the relations of people in that area.
Sure. Thank you for that, Julia. Dauda, I see you're back. Do you want to unmute and ask a question briefly so we can transition to the final phase? Or is anyone else who wants to make any comments or ask a question? Okay, so as not to delay, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box anytime, and we can continue the conversation on the platform. Thank you so much for this session, Julia. It's been quite refreshing. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. You remind me of what I should be doing and thinking about. All right, so we'll take a bit of break now, just a minute for people to kind of reflect on what we just discussed, and if there are any other things that you need to do before we have the final session with Dr. Ibrahim. The theme is still the World Health Day. We are still talking about healthy beginnings, hopeful futures, but we just want to take a time to also talk about the realities we're currently experiencing across the world and how that affects our futures. Because all of us here represent a form of future, at least for Africa and the countries we represent. And those coming behind us would take a cue from what we've done and how we are, you know, engaging the issues that we are confronting. So that is why we had this side session. So let's take a minute right now to reflect, and we can always come back to finish up. Thank you. Okay, that's good for that session. I don't know if Islamians is still on the call. Do you want to get back to the conversation we were having with Dr. Islamians? Are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm still here.
All right, great. So if you don't mind, I would like you to do a recap for those who probably joined the conversation a bit later. And, if there are any final questions for Dr. Lainka before we close out.
Okay. Thank you very much for this. Actually, I actually an interesting session, and I'm so glad. Like I learned a lot of during this. Yes, I think I have about like sorry, sorry, please. I need I need water.
Do you want me to pass Tom Tom to you from here? I have Tom Tom with me. Islamiat.
Yeah, I think I'll need that.
I always encourage people to take water or mint whenever they are having online sessions. It's how you keep your voice clear. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. I don't even know where this is coming from, but thank you very much. Okay, so I think I'm good to go now. I'm back. Hi, Dr. Olainka Ibrahim. I'm here again. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia. It was a very nice session. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. Did you miss me?
Of course, I did. Nice hearing you guys' voice.
Okay, so because of time, because it's already like kind of late, so I just get like take two more questions from my hand, and I don't know if anybody has any more question, and then we'll be rounding up. Are we good to go, sir?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
I guess. So the first question, as a medical educator and researcher, what are the biggest gap in pediatric training and research in Africa today?
Wow, that's a big one. Uh, being a pediatrician is one angle. Being a teacher is another angle. The biggest challenge for pediatric research in Africa is usually the funding. The fund. Our government, our policymaker did not committed adequate resources toward research, towards funding. And for us to really make innovative progress, we need to always fund research. Most times, research are usually funded through donor, through grants, which are mostly external. And say who has the piper dictate the tone. So most times, the research may not really tailor us towards the alignments, towards the goal that can improve the pediatrics in Africa, that can improve the child health. If there's anything I will suggest is the African need to look at the African solution to their problem and prioritize research to focus on our need rather than what somebody has actually addressed or concerned good enough for us. Well, as an educators, no doubt pediatry remain one of the areas to which can be improved upon. It has its own uniques. But I must say the fact that the teaching of pediatry also need to improve to explore the modern concepts, modern technology, such as the use of simulations-based training, use of hybrid model of trainings, and consider some other innovative delivery method of teaching, such as flipped classroom, in such a way, because the peculiarity of the children in such a way that you don't want to carry out some procedure first time on a live individual, for instance, neonatal resuscitating a newborn. The first time a student should try that should not be on a newborn that just been delivered. But if we had an adequate exposure through simulation practice, could have practiced this on mannequin over time before going to the clinical, and that would minimize the likelihoods of error and reduce the ethical issue that will arise from it. Are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so you have like mentored many postgraduate students. What advice do you have for young African researchers seeking to make meaningful contributions to the pediatric healthcare?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. I think the first is that nobody build themselves. So every young African researcher should know the fact that you cannot wake up one day and become a researcher, whether it be pediatrics or not. So you need to find a mentor. Who is a mentor? Somebody that will guide you through the process before you subsequently achieve some competency in how to write. You can only appreciate this if you keep your first draft you ever write as a writer in a desk or in a somewhere, and you look at it 10 years later and you see the difference. So my advice is for young Africans, not only in pediatrics, is the haste for us to find mentors who can guide us through the process. My advice is also the fact that for research, we need some degree of self-discipline, because research are never an urgent step unless at the time of COVID, where we need to quickly evaluate some of the interventions. So because research is not really urgent based and the reward is not usually immediate, you might have to have some self-discipline, put yourself on timelines, and overall also keep yourself abreast. What I say is that is the fact that if you want to publish a paper or carry out a research work today, it could span several months, from drafting the concept notes to review the literature, to drafting the protocol, to submit to ethical approval, looking for funds to execute the project, analyze the project, and finally disseminate the process. These are all things that can span months, and they are nothing to which you can say next 2 weeks I'm done with. But eventually, if you're able to follow this trajectory, then I can say the sky will be your limit, and it can be somebody that will not just pass through the rock, but somebody whose feet will be on the rocks. And when you are no more there, people can acknowledge your contribution towards improving the humanity, towards improving the pediatric health, and towards improving the African data. So we need to really be patient. We need to find a mentor. We need to maintain some degree of consistency if you want to be a researcher, not only in pediatrics, but all over the African generally related discipline. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Before I move on, I think somebody is raising up there, and I don't know if they have a question for you.
Magdalene.
Yeah, Magdalene. Hi, good evening.
Can you
Maybe it's a
unmute yourself?
mistake.
Yep.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olayinka, for such an insightful session. I'd like you to shed more light on specific foods that are of nutritional benefit to children, especially in the light of current economic strains and financial constraints on the part of parents. Can you shed more? You talked about looking inward, looking at things that are locally available. So I would like you to be very specific on the kind of foods that are readily available, how we can process them and, make them more nutritional for our children. And of course, how important, maybe a little bit of stress, I don't know, I'm thinking of how best to phrase the question, but I'm looking at, is it really important that children are given supplements, nutritional supplements? And
Okay.
if yes, what are the supplements that are highly common recommended? And if no, what are the best ways we can build our foods, okay, in the supplements into our foods? I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to put my thoughts together, so
Okay.
I'm not
So
sure you
whether
get
we
the
need a
question.
supplement or not, if no, why?
Yes.
If yes, why? Okay. Let me start with the first one. I usually look at the concept of nutrition from the early. For the first 6 months of life, it's been well documented that exclusive breastfeeding is the best for a baby. So many numerous advantages to the babies, advantage to the mother. And I used to joke that if a woman has breastfed successfully for the first 0 day of life to 6 months, it serves as a protective against increasing expenditure shortly after birth. So allow the father to recover, allow the mother to recover, because it protects against the early childhood diseases, a lot of things. Baby will be well, will be fine, except just to go for routine immunizations, I'll be okay. For 6 months, this is when the challenge comes in. Breast milk will not more be enough. So we need to really go complementary. For the airlight, most time they want to ban canned food, they want to buy a lot of things, which are some of them are beyond the low socioeconomic status in our community. And with the current reality of our country, their country, where the economic is big challenges, it is the right time for us to look inward. And for us to look inwards, there are so many local food that can be adapted. We have a lot of grains, ranging from maize to corns to millets. This can be prepared locally. And when these are prepared locally, the next question is that this form a bulk of carbohydrate. They need to have protein added to it. There are so many proteins that can be used to boost them. You can use, for instance, dry fish. You get a dry fish, you pick out the bones, you dry it, you blend it, you put it in a container, refrigerate it to be fine. So anytime you prepare this meals, millets, what do you say? Is the gorally you call it. You had some teaspoons or half teaspoon of this fish you have grinded. If it's crayfish, you had a half of it to eat, and it serves as a source of protein to the pulp as the mixture has been prepared. And occasionally, this pulp, you may also add some palm oil, like a teaspoon of palm oil to it to serve as a form of vitamin A. Supposing you don't even have money for fish, you don't have it, you can buy granules. If you peel the granite off and you blend the granite, then the granite milk can be extracted. And if you use this granite milk extracted, you can use it to prepare this pap. This fulfill the required basic thing of carbohydrate, protein, as well as the vitamin that are needed. And this complements the breastfeeding the mother is practicing, and they remove the money. Let me give an example. For you to buy 18 cans of this ready-to-made fortifiers that sold, I don't want to mention any particular one. It might need up to like 10 to 15,000 naira to buy just one. That may not last you try. But if you're able to get the millet, able to get this one, it may be spend no less than a couple of thousand, and it could last up to weeks, which can be. The only challenge you might need is where to refrigerate and keep them. So you can use still like dry fish, you can use something like granules to really fortify it. Indeed, the granule pastry has remained one of those core ingredients of those ready-to-use therapeutic groups have been sold. So, and as a child ages increase, you blend it with some mashed yam, some eggs into the food, some yams, fish into it, in such a way that they have this a lot of this extra one. Do we need supplementary? Yes or no? For family with adequate, sufficient food, where they have access to good quality, 3 square meal, a lot of variety, able to get basic things they need, the child is not malnourished, is not at risk of malnutrition. No need for supplementation. However, it's been found out that those from the low socioeconomic class, a lot of them may not be able to access some good quality proteins that the child needs in addition to the carbohydrates. For instance, in a typical family of African family, it might be swallow in the morning with no protein, swallow in the afternoon with no protein, swallow. I know swallow is predominantly carbohydrate. So for those categories, there are some what we call ready-to-use supplements that are given to them free by WHO. But we should know that these are for individual risk of malnutrition because of lack of access to the basic daily food. But those that have good access to good nutrition, don't at risk of malnutrition, supplementary is not needed, is not warranted. But those to which you look at the quality of their food, the number of time they eat per day, it's not going to be able to meet the daily requirements of the child, and the child may benefit from supplement. But for the high class in the society, that have access to food, that are not at risk of any deficiency, supplementation is not necessary once the child is getting adequate nutrition. Magdalene, I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Perfectly, you have. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for that. So basically, what you are telling us now is that for people that have access to food, to their 3 square meal, they don't need to take any supplement.
All right, sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Okay, I'm asking if what you are like telling us now is that people that have access to their 3 food, like 3 square meal, they don't
Yeah,
necessarily need to take supplements.
3 square meals with adequate
Yeah,
diet,
with
balanced
like,
diet, nutrition.
yes,
They don't need a
balanced diet.
supplement. Yeah, they don't need supplements. Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I thought
both.
there are like some supplements that you take to aid, like to make you eat or something like that.
No, no, no. Those,
Oh,
those are just stimulants. They don't really change much.
okay, okay. No problem. Thank you very much, sir. So, my final question from my end. So, how can healthcare professionals stay effective despite constraints like inadequate infrastructure and workforce shortages, sir?
How cool? Sorry, what's the
How
question?
can
How?
healthcare professionals stay effective despite constraints like inadequate infrastructure and workplace shortages?
This is a big one. Uh, the healthcare workers staying effective with minimal infrastructural support is a challenge. However, there's what we call inherent uh, determinants, like an individual kind of, we have inheriting resilience for us to really survive, especially in the extreme conditions. The healthcare worker, I will encourage us to stay positive. We should stay, also give our best, but we should also look at the fact that it's not the fault of this patient, it's not the fault of the mother, it's not the fault of the child, it's the system. So within our capacity, we should go extra mile to do our best within our limit. This will ensure the fact that even though despite limitation we face in the environment, we still give our best because of whatever is best available, but we should also carry out the patient along so that if we don't meet the expectation, they will not hold us responsible. But within whatever we have, we should make best use of it. We should provide the support. We should remain resilient. We should also be hope that with other African countries doing one better one day, our own system will also improve for the best.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I don't know, does anybody have any question before I like conclude and hand over? Okay, so before we conclude this session, I'd like to like extend an heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Olainka Ibrahim and Dr. Julia Mango, for sharing their expertise and insights with us today. Your contributions have like enriched our understanding of bridging research and policy for maternal and newborn health in Africa. Thank you so much for your time, dedication, and passion for improving global health outcome. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank
So before I like officially sign out as well and hand over to my moderator, so I would like to like take a moment to introduce everyone to Slum and Rural Health Initiative. Slum and Rural Health Initiative is a non-profit organization working across Nigeria, Gambia, Ethiopia. We were founded in 2017 and we are registered across the country that I just mentioned. So our mission is to improve access to healthcare information and services, especially for vulnerable communities, using our 3 ARC. We have a 3 ARC: advocacy, technology, and research. Our team includes health professionals, researchers, social scientists, and creatives who are passionate about changing how health information is shared in underserved areas. So some of our initiative focuses on youth health, infectious diseases awareness, and community health empowerment. We have some ongoing projects now, and if this seems like something that you're interested in, you can volunteer with us, partner with us. We have ongoing projects across different states. We have a Better Mama Picking project that is implemented across 5 states. We have in Oyo State, Abia State, Ebonyi, Gombe, and Kansas states. The Better Mama Picking project is focusing on hygiene practices during pregnancy and after birth. So we practice like train healthcare workers who in turn educate pregnant and nursing mothers, like a tax shifting model. So also we have our Eat for HPV project that is implemented in Lagos State, which is aimed to create awareness about HPV and increasing HPV vaccination and many more. You can always like follow us on our social media platform. We are on all social media platforms at Shrine Africa. So if this is something like you're interested in, you can volunteer with us and you can partner in a lot of projects together. So thank you for your interest in Global Health Everybody. I'm looking forward to collaborating with everyone in the future. So like I said earlier, my name is Mukhtar Islamiat. I'm a program associate from Slum and Rights Initiative. It's so nice to be here on the call. Thank you very much, Dr. Olainka Ibrahim, for the insights this evening. I had an amazing time and I think I learned a whole lot, more than I had planned on learning actually. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Let me also thank the organizers and the coordinator of the Graduate Research Clinic. It was a great opportunity for allowing me to speak to great audience that we have today, also to share my experience. It's been a nice time trying to actually self-reflect on the way we're here in Africa, the progress, and where we are going. So thanks you once again for the opportunity, the moderator, the host, as well as dear guests on the platform. Thank you all.
All right, thank
Um,
you. Okay, go on, Islamiat.
Okay, so I just want to like request for the speakers and do on Braille LinkedIn for those of us that might like want to connect with them. I don't know if they can share that with us in the chat box if possible. Thank you.
Well, a step ahead of me there because I was about to say that as part of the
Yeah.
collaborative process that we want to invite everyone to join the GRC platform. That's where both speakers are and other speakers that will be inviting to future seminars would also be on the platform. So if you copy the link I just posted, you can sign up to join the GRC and then you'll be able to engage the speakers personally, but they're also welcome to share their handles. I just want to once again appreciate everyone for the time taken to engage. And this is one of the things we want to encourage amongst early career researchers as well as professionals. We have a culture of always talking about our problems and we don't talk about solutions, especially in Africa. And it looks as if the academia and even the medical sector is helpless in addressing some of the problems that we experience. So this forum is one step forward to speak with experts, speak with ourselves, and learn how we can move ahead. So you're all invited to the next in series seminar. It's coming up sometime later this month. We'll share the invitation through our regular platforms. And please also be aware that the recorded session of this meeting would also be shared on our social media platforms. So if you had missed any part of this engagement, especially with Dr. Lainka, you can always go listen to the recording. So once again, thank you for coming and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Right. I wish you guys to bye for now. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.